quiet mountain town, dangers buried beneath the snow. A former soldier, a new life. And a young woman caught in the middle of a deadly plot. Courage to survive, time running out to save her. Where secrets are buried in snow, the real battle begins. David, 35, was a soldier marked by deep scars from years of dangerous missions. When his body and spirit could no longer endure, he left the military, seeking a fresh start in a quiet mountain town. This peaceful place felt like a sanctuary where he could finally escape his past. Hiding his identity, David began working at a luxurious ski resort hotel. Though only a few weeks in, he faced a starkly different world. The crisp mountain air offered a strange comfort, but adjusting to the arrogance and demands of the wealthy guests proved challenging. Living in a secluded mountain cabin, David found solace in its silence, broken only by visits from his neighbor, John. A retired doctor and former military physician, John quickly recognized David's past struggles. Over time, he became both a friend and a father figure to him. One evening, David invited John over to his cabin. They shared a warm meal by the fire, their conversation drifting between John's old memories and David's efforts to rebuild his life. The peaceful evening was a rare reprieve for David, but it wouldn't last long. The next morning, the hotel was unusually busy. While carrying luggage, David overheard a chilling conversation that stopped him in his tracks. Near the fireplace, a group of 5 was warming themselves, 4 men and a young woman, all appearing to be siblings. David's attention was particularly drawn to the woman, Sarah, who seemed around 25. She had a weary yet deeply contemplative look about her. Meanwhile, the men were speaking in low but serious tones. This trip was a smart idea. Convincing our foolish father was impossible, one of them said with a sly smirk. Exactly, another added. We'll have to handle this ourselves. Sarah needs to be eliminated. David's breath caught. He tried to discern whether the words were a joke, but the seriousness on their faces sent a chill down his spine. Among the crackling of the fireplace and the hum of other guests, those words rang sharper than anything else in his mind. He stood frozen, unable to tear his eyes away from Sarah and her brothers. In that moment, he realized the day had taken a sinister turn, far from ordinary. As dinner time rolled around, the hotel staff had set up large outdoor grills. Guests gathered around, enjoying their meals and sipping mulled wine at the nearby tables. David was assigned to one of the grills and, by chance, found himself stationed near the group he had overheard that morning. While tending to the grill, he kept an ear on their conversation. At first, everything seemed normal. The siblings chatted and laughed about trivial matters. However, when Sarah excused herself to fetch a shawl from her room, the tone of their conversation shifted dramatically. Sensing something serious, David focused all his attention on them. They were discussing a substantial inheritance and the family business that Sarah had inherited from her late mother. Although their faces betrayed anger, they were careful not to show it to Sarah. David's unease deepened. One of the brothers whispered, "We have to finish this or we'll end up with nothing." Another lowered his head and muttered, "Tomorrow we'll lead her off the trail while skiing. Somewhere secluded. It'll all be over." David's blood ran cold. He didn't want to believe what he was hearing, but the determined looks on their faces left no room for doubt. Even the icy mountain air wasn't enough to steady his breath. When Sarah returned to the table, the brothers smoothly shifted the conversation back to light-hearted topics as if nothing had happened. But David couldn't take his eyes off them. David's mind was a tangled mess as he cleaned and dismantled the grills, carrying them back to the kitchen. One question kept looping in his head: should I warn Sarah or come up with a more effective plan? In the end, he decided that a simple warning would be useless. Her brothers were clearly prepared, and a direct approach wouldn't stop them. He needed a different strategy. He reviewed the work schedule for the next day. His assigned area was the ski lift, far from the trail mentioned by the brothers. That's when it hit him: being physically present wouldn't be enough to protect Sarah. He needed more information about these people and their intentions. However, accessing guest information was strictly against hotel policy. Employees were forbidden from checking guest records without authorization. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. David observed the reception desk carefully. When the receptionist left briefly for the restroom, he seized the moment. Moving swiftly, he sat at the computer, found the guest list for the day and made a quick copy. His hands trembled with urgency, but he managed to act fast. With the list in hand, he left the hotel and returned to his cabin. Once home, David pored over the list. He started researching the names online, piecing together the puzzle. It didn't take long for the truth to emerge. This family owned a major media company. The the father had been married twice. Sarah was his only biological daughter from his first marriage, while the 4 brothers were stepchildren from his second marriage. David couldn't believe how this situation resembled something out of a thriller movie. Yet here he was, facing what might be the most critical challenge of his life. He had to figure out how to use this information and protect Sarah. David tossed and turned in bed all night, unable to come up with a concrete plan. By morning he got ready for work with tired, bloodshot eyes. The only idea he could think of was to hand over his shift at the ski lift if necessary and follow the brothers. But even he knew this wasn't much of a plan, it was flimsy at best. The unease in his chest tightened like a knot, making it hard to breathe. As he stepped outside, an unfamiliar breeze brushed against him. A light but cold wind broke the usual stillness of the mountain. His neighbor John was sitting on his porch, gazing at the gray clouds and the towering pines. When John noticed him, he took a deep breath and said, "David, there's a storm coming. I've spent years on this mountain, I can feel it. Be careful." David muttered under his breath, "Just what I needed." A storm could complicate things even further. But he had no time to dwell on it. When he arrived at the hotel's breakfast hall, he saw the brothers gathered around a table in their ski gear, laughing and enjoying their meal. To anyone else, they looked like a normal group, but David knew the danger lurking beneath their cheerful facade. He quickly completed his early tasks and headed to the ski lift station. It was peak time, and the place buzzed with people eager to hit the slopes. While others were excitedly chatting and lining up, David's focus remained fixed on the brothers. When he saw them board a lift and head toward the mountain summit, he grabbed his binoculars and followed their movements closely. At the top, the brothers spent some time skiing together, blending in with the crowd. For now, everything seemed normal, and the presence of many other skiers offered David a small sense of relief. Yet, the nagging feeling in his gut grew stronger with each passing moment. Something was bound to go wrong, and he knew he had to stay alert. The chairlift was nearing its 5th round as the crowd began to thin out. Once again, the brothers boarded the lift together. Watching them adjust their ski straps, David felt certain this was the moment they had been planning. The wind was picking up, and most people had already returned to the hotel. The brothers, however, exchanged knowing glances, laughing as one of them said, "Come on, one last run." But David could sense the hidden intent behind their cheerful words. As soon as the lift started moving, a loud announcement echoed from the hotel. "A storm is approaching. All guests are advised to return to the hotel immediately." The rapidly intensifying weather confirmed John's earlier warning. After running the lift for the last time, David turned to the colleague beside him and said, "I need to check something, just 5 minutes." Without waiting for a response, he mounted the snowmobile he had prepared earlier. Pulling out his binoculars, he tracked the brothers as they disembarked from the lift and got ready to ski. A couple was nearby, also preparing to ski, but Sarah was nowhere to be seen. A few minutes later, he emerged onto the trail and scanned the slope with his binoculars. The brothers were gathered, talking amongst themselves, but Sarah was still missing. For her to disappear so quickly didn't make sense. He shifted his focus to the hotel's direction, trying to spot anyone skiing down, but the worsening storm made it hard to see. Snow and wind blurred the figures descending the mountain. Is Sarah back at the hotel, or is she in danger somewhere out here? Suddenly, the 4 brothers started skiing downhill at high speed. A pang of dread hit David. What if Sarah was already in danger? There was no time to waste. He revved the snowmobile and sped down the trail, weaving through the storm. The wind and snow lashed against him, forming an almost impenetrable wall. His pulse raced, driven by the fear of what he might find and the urgency to act. This was a path with no turning back. When David hurried back to the hotel, he found the 4 brothers frantically questioning each other. "Where did she go? Did you see her?" David's mind raced as he approached them. "What's going on? Is something wrong?" he asked. The brothers immediately tensed up. One of them replied, "Our sister got off the chairlift with us but started skiing without waiting. She disappeared from sight and she's not at the hotel either." David paused, trying to process what he'd heard. Was this part of their plan, or had things spiraled out of control? Just then, the hotel management announced over the PA system that due to the severe storm, all guests were to remain indoors. The doors were locked for safety. But David couldn't shake the growing unease in his chest. He discreetly kept an eye on the brothers and overheard them whispering in a corner. Their plan seemed to have taken an unexpected turn. One of them sneered, "It's better this way. The storm won't spare her. Mother Nature will do our job for us. We just have to stay quiet." Another asked, "Do you think anyone suspects?" The first shrugged, "Are you kidding? She's clueless. David's tension grew unbearable. Meanwhile, the hotel staff began organizing a search party for Sarah, but David knew the official procedure would be too slow. His mind was set. He had to find her himself. Quietly, he slipped out through the hotel's back exit. The storm was brutal. Driving the snowmobile was a struggle as wind and snow lashed against him. A gut feeling told him Sarah had tried to escape, but in these conditions she wouldn't last long. He powered through the treacherous trail, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Sarah!" But the howling wind drowned out his voice. Finally, he spotted something, a hand protruding from the snow and nearby, a red scarf partially buried beneath the white blanket. Under a tree, cold and alone, was Sarah. David's heart sank. He leapt off the snowmobile, frantically digging through the snow with his hands. When he uncovered her face, she was unconscious, her skin pale and icy. She had clearly been out there for hours, fighting the deadly storm. Fueled by adrenaline, David lifted Sarah into his arms and carried her to the snowmobile. Battling the storm's unrelenting force, he drove to John's cabin, the closest refuge. Pounding on the door with all his strength, David shouted, "John, open up!" When John opened the door, he was stunned. David, breathless and shivering, said, "We need to get her inside now. She's freezing to death." John quickly brought them inside, grabbing blankets and wrapping Sarah up to warm her. As a former doctor, he carefully checked her vital signs. David stood nearby, heart pounding, as John finally spoke in a calm yet firm voice, "She'll survive. But if you'd been even a few minutes later, it would have been too late." David exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. But he knew the danger wasn't entirely over. The storm had not only revealed the mountain's harshness but also the dark secrets hiding within its shadows. After a while, Sarah slowly opened her eyes, thanks to John's careful treatment. Her dull, weary gaze revealed the trauma she had just endured. John gently gave her warm, sugary water to drink. "Don't talk, just rest," he said, calming her. But the fear in Sarah's eyes lingered. A moment later, Sarah spoke in a trembling voice, "They were going to kill me. I ran. I realized it just in time. I saw a gun on one of them. When I asked why, he said, 'In case we see a bear.'" The others laughed and joked, but on the chairlift, everything became clear. "I didn't know what to do." David felt the weight of her fear and quickly asked, "Who should we call?" "The police." Without hesitation, Sarah replied, "My father." David pulled out his phone and handed it to her. With shaking hands, Sarah dialed the number and began a long conversation. Her voice was low and strained as she explained the situation to her father. When the call ended, she turned to David and gave him a heartfelt, grateful look. "Thank you for saving me. Can I stay here until my father arrives?" David nodded without hesitation. "Of course. But no one can know you're here." Sarah agreed with a nod, fully understanding the gravity of the situation. Sarah stayed in constant contact with her father, who was struggling to reach her due to the relentless storm. Meanwhile, the hotel staff continued searching for her, unaware of David's secret plan unfolding quietly in the background. During the chaos brought by the storm, David made a bold decision. He would sneak into the four brothers' rooms to gather evidence. He carefully searched each room and eventually he struck gold. He found detailed sketches that revealed every aspect of the plan, maps of the mountain, the location of trails, and even weather forecasts. It was chilling proof of how meticulously the scheme had been crafted. The most damning discovery, however, was a gun hidden in one of the drawers. David carefully placed it in a plastic bag for safekeeping. The next day, Sarah's father finally arrived, having braved the storm. David and John presented all the evidence they had collected, the maps, the sketches, and the gun. As he looked over the damning materials, Sarah's father's face shifted between anger and profound gratitude. Fixing his gaze on David and John, he said, "You've saved my life. Without you..." His voice trailed off, choked with the weight of what could have been. When the truth was fully revealed, the four brothers not only lost their claim to the inheritance but were also arrested and interrogated by the police. The evidence, coupled with Sarah's testimony and David's account, left them no choice but to confess. Sarah's father expressed his heartfelt gratitude to David and John. "Meeting people like you is nothing short of a miracle," he said. David humbly replied, "We just did what was right." Sarah, her voice steady despite everything she'd endured, looked at David and said, "I owe you my life. You saved me." A week later, Sarah's father paid David a visit. After expressing his gratitude once again, he made David an offer. Given David's military background, he proposed that David take charge of a security company in which he was a major shareholder. "A leader like you would be a tremendous asset to my team," he said. David hesitated for a moment upon hearing the offer. He had worked hard to build a new life after his years in the military, and he wasn't sure if taking on such a significant responsibility was the right move. Sensing his doubt, John spoke up firmly, "This is a life-changing opportunity. It's not like the military, it's a much more stable and peaceful path." His confidence in David seemed to tip the scales. After some thought, David decided to accept the offer. He felt that this new chapter could help him rediscover himself, using the lessons from his past to build a better future. Once he took over the security company, David quickly assembled a strong team. He trained his staff with professionalism, emphasizing both technical skills and ethical values. The company grew rapidly, and David's leadership became widely respected. Despite his busy schedule, David never missed a weekend visit to the mountain town to see John. Sitting on the porch with their coffees, John listened intently to the new stories David brought each time. Together, they gazed at the snow-covered mountains, sharing the quiet comfort of their friendship. For David, this was a fresh chapter in his life, one built on the foundation of loyalty, friendship, and the brave decisions made at just the right moment. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.